Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Yemen's government and the Southern Transition Council have agreed to return to a stalled peace deal brokered by Saudi Arabia. STC spokesperson Nizar Haytham said the separatists will give up their dreams of autonomy over southern Yemen to pursue the Riyadh agreement. Saudi state media said under the resolution the Prime Minister will form a government within 30 days from both northern and southern Yemen. The United States has welcomed a ceasefire announcement by the Taliban and Kabul government for Eid al-Adha. Special envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad said Washington hopes the occasion will bring Afghans one step closer to sustainable peace. Daily COVID-19 cases in the US have climbed back to over 60,000 with nearly 1,600 deaths. The country's infection tally has exceeded 4.3 million as the death toll crossed 149,000. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported 921 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the count to over 88,000 with nearly 2.5 million cases. Over in Pakistan, 27 more people have lost their lives, taking the toll to nearly 6,000 with over 276,000 cases. Globally, the virus has claimed some 659,000 lives while infecting more than 16.6 million people. Russia and the United States have agreed to continue talks to avoid space-related incidents. The U.S. Department of State says during the first space dialogue with Moscow in 7 years in Vienna, both parties discussed the existing and potential threats and a forward-looking agenda to promote sustainable activities in space. And in the Italian Serie A, Inter Milan beat Napoli by 2-0 at the San Siro. Fullback Danilo D'Ambrosio and star forward Lautaro Martinez were on target as the hosts stay second behind the newly crowned champions Juventus. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. We start from Yemen, whose government and the Southern Transition Council have agreed to return to a stalled peace deal brokered by Saudi Arabia. The STC spokesperson Nizar Haytham said the separatists will give up their dreams of autonomy over southern Yemen to pursue the Riyadh agreement. Haytham said the STC affirms the continuation and deepening of a strategic partnership with the Arab alliance at all levels. Saudi state media said under the resolution, the Prime Minister will form a government within 30 days from both northern and southern Yemen. Welcoming the Saudi proposal, Yemen's embassy in Washington said a new governor and the head of the security agency will be appointed in Aden. The government said the STC should now work under the leadership of President Mansour Hadi to resolve issues. The Riyadh agreement was negotiated in response to a southern separatist takeover of Aden city in last November. Now, the US has welcomed a ceasefire announcement by the Taliban and Kabul government for Eid al-Adha. Special envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad said Washington hopes the occasion will bring Afghans one step closer to sustainable peace. Khalilzad said Washington wishes to see Afghan national security forces continue to service the people. He thanked the Afghan forces for their commitment to the country. Meanwhile, the UN mission in Afghanistan has also hailed the announced ceasefire. It said the reductions in violence should now pave the way for a quick start to intra-Afghan negotiations. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Office has strongly condemned the restrictions imposed by Indian authorities on Eid al-Adha prayers in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, the Foreign Office said India is using COVID-19 related restrictions as a ruse to curb religious freedom of Muslims. It urged the international community to take notice of the violations of Muslims' rights in Kashmir. The statement added, India cannot suppress Kashmiri's struggle for freedom by such repressive measures. The situation in the region has been tense since India stripped occupied Valley's autonomy in August last year and imposed a curfew. Now in Pakistan, 27 people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 5,892. The Health Ministry says 1,063 new cases were reported as the tally crossed 276,000. Officials say nearly 245,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. The ministry said there are now over 25,000 active cases and 1,179 critical cases in the country. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 119,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 92,000 cases. Daily COVID-19 cases in the US have climbed back to over 60,000 with nearly 1,600 deaths. The country's infections tally has exceeded 4.3 million as the death toll crossed 149,000. Globally, the virus has claimed some 659,000 lives while infecting more than 16.6 million people. More details in this report.
The new coronavirus shows no signs of declining in the Americas. Brazil has reported 921 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the count to over 88,000 with nearly 2.5 million cases. Brasilia says it is confident of having the Oxford University COVID-19 vaccine in December. Over in the US, healthcare facilities struggle to deal with the enormous strain of cases emerging every day, while President Donald Trump continues to endorse hydroxychloroquine as a viable treatment for the virus.
It's recommendations of many other people, including doctors. Many doctors think it is extremely successful. The hydroxychloroquine, coupled with the zinc and perhaps the zithromycin. But many doctors think it's extremely good, and some people don't. Some people, I think it's become very political. I happen to believe in it.
After Spain, the virus has Germany in its crosshairs as over 3,000 cases have been reported in the past week. Germany has joined the UK in advising its people against traveling to virus-hit Spanish regions.
I can hardly imagine, or rather not imagine at all, is that we will again be introducing border controls all over Germany. I have experience, we both have experience with border controls, had them at part of our borders with France, Switzerland, Austria and Denmark.
Meanwhile, China has reported 101 new cases of coronavirus, the highest number since April. Of the new cases, 89 are reported from the far western region of Xinjiang. In Australia, Greater Queensland is closing its border to people from Sydney, requiring returnees to spend 14 days in quarantine. Emergency teams have been sent to tackle the virus outbreak to nursing homes in Melbourne, Victoria, as the state has reported over 9,000 cases.
Meanwhile, China has slammed the US for reckless provocation after both sides ordered tit-for-tat closures of each other's consulates in Chengdu and Houston. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for rational communication between the two countries to solve bilateral disagreements. Speaking with his French counterpart, Chinese Minister Wang said China-US relations could fall into the abyss of confrontation. He said the international community should resist any unilateral or hegemonic act by the US. Wang also noted both the countries should never allow anti-China elements to overturn decades of successful exchanges and cooperation. Sino-US relations have deteriorated in recent weeks in an intensifying standoff between the two after the closures of their consulates. China says the UK risks pursuing a dead-end policy if it bows to pressure to undo progress in building relations with Beijing. In a telephonic conversation with his British counterpart, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said both countries should strengthen ties as China has always been an opportunity rather than a threat to the United Kingdom. Wang said London politicized 5G issue and discriminated against Chinese companies by following calls from the US to take a tougher position. For his part, UK's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said Britain will work to maintain positive, constructive engagement with China, but added that China needs to rebuild trust in the global community. Moving on, the US Navy has criticized Iran as irresponsible and reckless for conducting an exercise involving firing a missile at a replica aircraft carrier in the Gulf waters. In a statement, the US Navy said Iran conducts offensive exercises attempting to intimidate and coerce Washington. It said the Navy is fully capable of defending itself against any maritime threat. Iran held the exercises near the Strait of Hormuz, which is a vital shipping lane for a fifth of global oil output. Now moving on, Turkey says it's ready to address US F-35 concerns over Ankara's procurement of Moscow's S-400 missile defense systems. Speaking at a webinar, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said US should reconsider its decision to suspend Turkey from the program. He also underlined that the suspension was unjust. Akar said the US government reports show Turkey's suspension from the program has brought critical risks to production for the aircraft. He said Turkey's defense industry has continued to supply key parts of the aircraft despite the COVID-19 pandemic. He said Ankara was not just a customer of the F-35 program, but also a partner. Now, Russia says 35 out of 133 invited states have confirmed to join the Army 2020 Defense Forum. Russian Defense Minister official says coronavirus pandemic has complicated preparations for the event. In an interview, head of the exhibition department, Colonel Oleg Kulakovsky, said at least 11 states will send high-level delegations to the event. He said this forum will be the first large-scale international exhibition in Russia in 2020 after the quarantine was lifted. The Army 2020 International Military and Technical Forum in Russia will run next month at several practice ranges and military districts. Still with Russia, which says it has no plans to rejoin the G7 given its satisfaction with the Group of 20. In a statement, Kremlin spokesperson said President Vladimir Putin has neither taken any initiatives nor made any request to revive the country's participation. The statement read the group lacks global significance because it excludes China, Iran, Brazil, Turkey and other countries. It said Russia is satisfied with the G20's effectiveness because the group meets modern economic realities. Now, this comes after German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said Berlin rejected a Washington proposal of inviting Moscow to the G7. Russia and the US have agreed to continue talks to avoid space-related incidents. The US Department of State says the exchange took place during the first space dialogue with Moscow in 7 years in Vienna. The State Department said both parties discussed current and future space threats, policies, strategies and doctrine. It said they conversed over a forward-looking agenda to promote safe and sustainable activities in space. They also mulled operational issues to minimize misunderstandings between both countries. Now, this comes after US and the UK accuse Russia of weaponizing the space and threatening the interstellar status quo. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Thousands of workers have taken to the streets to the Bolivia El Alto city to protest the delay in the country's presidential election. The Bolivian Workers' Center Union led the demonstrations after September 6 polls were postponed to 18th October due to the coronavirus. The union says presidential candidate Jeanine Áñez and her interim government is using the pandemic to extend its power. It said the Conservative administration is persecuting the supporters of former President Evo Morales' Movement for Socialism. Morales has been exerting his political influence from exile and has called for the election to be held as previously planned. The union also declared an indefinite general strike and mass mobilizations across the country.
We will be here until the end, even if the blood runs. This will be the fault of the de facto president, since she has not complied with the election date and is playing with the people. She's playing with the emotions of the people because we want elections on September 6 either way.
The delayed vote in the rerun of last year's election that sparked violent protests leading to the downfall of long-term leftist leader Evo Morales. Now, moving on, a report by conservation group says populations of migratory river fish have collapsed by 76% on average in the last 50 years. This research was conducted by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, WWF, Zoological Society of London and the World Fish Migration Foundation. The groups believe overfishing and loss of habitat are the reasons for this catastrophic decline. The study looked at 247 species of fish from around the world. It found that their populations had declined on average 3% per year between 1970 and 2016. Europe saw the sharpest fall of the regions with a drop of 93%, while populations shrunk an average of 84% in Latin America and the Caribbean. Johnny Depp's lawyer says the actor has been the victim of invented allegations and physical violence from his former wife, Amber Heard. Depp's lawyer, David Sherborne, made these remarks at London's High Court on the final day of the actor's 3-week libel suit against a British tabloid. Depp is suing news group newspapers, publishers of The Sun, and one of its journalists over a 2018 article that called him a wife-beater. Pirates of the Caribbean star and his former wife, Amber Heard, both gave evidence at the trial. Depp said he had never been violent towards Heard or any other woman and that she was the one who had attacked him. In closing submissions for Hollywood actor, his lawyer said the paper acted as both judge and jury. Earlier, the Sun's lawyer said there was no doubt Depp had systematically abused Heard.
Finally.
In business stories now, stocks in the Asia Pacific are trading mixed as investors await an interest rate decision by the U.S. Federal Reserve. Mainland Chinese stocks led gains regionally, with the Shanghai Composite up by over 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index and South Korea's Kospi edged fractionally higher. Japanese stocks lagged as the Nikkei 225 and Topix indexes declined just over 1% each. Australia's ASX 200 has dipped fractionally. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan index hovered above the flat line. Now in football, Inter Milan beat Napoli by 2-0 in Italian Serie A clash at the San Siro. Fullback Danilo D'Ambrosio and the star forward Lautaro Martinez were on target as the hosts, a second behind the champions Juventus. The hosts went ahead after 11 minutes when D'Ambrosio turned the ball home from Cristiano Biraghi's cutback. Napoli created lots of chances, but Martinez scored an incredible long-range goal in the 74th minute to seal the win. Meanwhile, free-scoring Atlanta beat Parma by 2-1 to close in on a 100-goal Serie A tally for this season. The win also extended Atlanta's unbeaten run to 17 league games, and the club will now need 2 more goals to match the record set in 1950. Russia's suspended athletics federation has asked World Athletics to postpone a decision on potential fresh sanctions or even expulsion. Russia's AF's troubles have snowballed in recent months, with some of its officials and senior coaches embroiled in doping scandals. In a letter, RUSAF appealed to the World Athletics not to rule on its fate at the council meeting this week. It said it does not have sufficient funds to cover the fine and expenses, totaling $6.3 million. The federation has been suspended for nearly 5 years over mass doping. It also missed a 1st July deadline to pay millions of dollars to World Athletics as a fine for breaching rules. With that, we come to the end of the bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.